Hello, I'm Deanna Herron, host of the Deanna Herron Podcast Show. Have you ever wanted to do something bold, like start a business, write a book, or go for your dream job? This show was created for women just like you who want to be bold, shine bright with grace. My goal is to educate you, inspire you, and empower you with ideas that can transform your life. Be inspired by the Deanna Herron Podcast Show at deannaherron.net. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Deanna Herron Podcast Show. This is Deanna Herron, your host. I'm so happy to be with you today. I know we were together last week, but to be quite honest, I have all of these podcasts that have been pre-recorded. And for me, I haven't seen you in a couple of weeks. So I'm so happy to be with you and so grateful for what I get to share with you today. It's not actually what I had planned. So about 30 minutes before I was to record this podcast, God put a different idea into my mind. So I'm going to share this with you today. If you have not had the opportunity to listen to last week's podcast, episode 33, go over to the Deanna Herron Podcast Show and take a listen. And I'm going to tell you the things that I share about how to build and grow relationships, either in your business, in your life, in your friendships, in your family, will absolutely transform the way that you see relationships and how to build them. So go take a listen and utilize those tools. They have been super helpful for me in my business as well as in my family relationships. So let's get started. On today's podcast, I am going to share with you a little piece of my journey that is in my book. So Journey to Joy, it is almost complete, and I'm excited to share that with you as well. But I had this little nudge today to share a story that is in the book. I don't know who needs to listen to this, but whoever it is, this is made specifically for you because I was actually pivoted in a different direction than what I thought I needed to share today. So this episode is When It Doesn't Make Sense, God Does. And I'm going to share a story that Mark and I went through on our journey to where we live currently. And through that journey, I'm going to share some things and some thoughts that I went through, that Mark went through. We went together as a couple. We went through together as a couple that will hopefully help you as you walk in different journeys in your life. So I don't know what it is you're going through right now, but if it doesn't make sense, I want you to know that God does. So here's the story. About 3.5 years ago, Mark and I were living in a town that I basically grew up in. We, at the time, had been married. We've been married almost 29 years now. So we had been married 26 years and we had lived in this community. We had friends. Our children grew up in this community and we had a life. We had roots in this community. And several things had occurred around the same time. Our youngest was going off to college. And, you start to think, oh my goodness, what are we going to do at this phase in our life when the house is empty? Because our house was always the house that the kids came to. I always had things to feed them. I always had, I was ready for them. I was prepared for them, which takes a lot of time and energy, right? And all of a sudden I was looking at, this is going to change. Not only is this going to change, the noise in the house, the activity in the house, but our daughter is going to be off to school and it's our last one. And we are entering into a different phase of our life, that phase of empty nesters. And so that was happening in her life. And so Mark and I were just in that process of, goodness, this is really going to look different and feel different. And we weren't really thinking that there would be a significant amount of change, except that Carly was going off to college. A few days before we were taking Carly to college, I got a phone call that my mother had passed away unexpectedly, and obviously a shock, right? So And I can only share this piece of the story with you without tears in my eyes because I have worked through that. Not that it's not emotional today, it is emotional today. Obviously, anytime you have a loss. But I want to explain to you, we lost our last going to college. I lost my mom. 6 months later, get this, Mark's mom passed away. And so within 6 months, we experienced our daughter going to college, my mom, losing Mark's mom. And then guess what else? Mark made the decision to retire in June. So within 1 year, there were some major, major things that were happening in our life. And I have to tell you that even though there were some major things happening within our life, that doesn't mean that God stops working, you guys, that He's not going to guide you in one direction or another. And so I, of all people, got the tug around this time to move to my husband's hometown. Now, this is the amazing part of the story because that could honestly only come from me because I grew up in Oklahoma City. I was familiar with that. I'm a city girl. My husband was raised in a small town, and that was never of any interest to me. So when I had that tug, I knew that that tug had to come from me and not my husband because I would have never agreed or even thought that that would be the direction in our life, especially with all the change that was occurring. And Mark and I started talking about this tug in my heart, and it was a tug, but I actually heard what I call the voice. And it's just God's voice telling me, maybe this is something that you should look into. The reason why that came into our lives at that time is we had purchased 20 acres in Mark's hometown. And we had owned that property for about 15 years. And I was in the process of building a retreat center on the property. And so the property was forefront in our minds. And we were out here all the time. And so I think it was because of just the peace that it had here, the fact that we were building a retreat center, and that it was in the forefront of my mind, that it was, my heart was open, and God put that in my heart, that tug to make that transition. And so we started to really investigate that transition. And of all times, with all the other change that was happening, and as we normally do, right? We put little feelers out to our friends and family. So I want to share with you, this is one of the most incredible journeys of my life that I'm about to share with you. And what I have learned through this process is I am at my very best. And I think you can relate to this as well. I'm at my very best when I'm thriving and not striving. Can you guys relate to that? When I'm thriving and not striving, when I'm trying to make something happen is when I'm striving. And when I'm just at peace in the process, not laying low, not that doesn't mean I'm not doing anything, but when I'm just at peace with the process, I seem to thrive. And this is a journey where I learned that I would so much rather thrive than strive any day of my life. So during this particular time, you guys, I learned to choose faith over my emotions. And so when you are in that journey of hearing the voice or that tug, there's several things that you are going to go through. So what I want to share with you today are 4 things that I actually went through during this process of the tug. And one of them was doubt. So number 1 is doubt. So you will experience some doubt when you feel like you're being moved in a different direction. Whatever you want to call that, the tug, God's voice, your intuition, whatever it is that you want to call that. For me, it's God's voice. There will be doubt that is what you really heard. The second thing is you will experience some fear. And I definitely experienced a lot of fear. Mark experienced fear. Our children experience fear. And that fear comes from the what and the why. It's the unknown, right? Like, why? Why do we need to do this? What do you want us to do when we move to this small town? So that's number 2. is the fear. Number three are distractions. You will experience some distractions on your journey when you are going down that road of trying to follow God's voice and experiencing the peace of thriving and not striving. So many, many distractions. And the fourth thing that I want to encourage you to do is to choose faith. Okay. Number four is to choose faith. So I want you to know that during this process, I did doubt that was from God, that voice was from God. And the reason why I doubted is there were so many things that were happening in our life. There were so many changes that were happening. It didn't make sense to make another change. Have you ever experienced that? Like another change? Are you kidding me? That can throw you down this spiral of emotions, right? So I did doubt it. And the second thing that happened was the fear that set in of, gosh, I'm losing my security. You want me to leave my security, my zone of the comfortable, which that is what I do, is I teach people to get uncomfortable. And here I am second guessing, getting out of my own comfort zone. That fear of, why am I supposed to get out of my comfort zone and move to an area where I know nobody? Why am I supposed to leave my roots, a place where our children grew up, and go to the land of the unknown? It was this overwhelming fear at times. And then, of course, the distractions that came in were definitely people's opinions. And I would say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there were at least 25 people who had an opinion about the move, and they didn't hesitate to share. And I know it's because they love us so much. So the first people that had an opinion were, of course, our children. When we told them that we were thinking about moving, they literally thought we had lost our minds. Like the first thing that my kids said was, "Mom, this does not make sense. It doesn't make sense for you to move there. There's nothing there for you. You were raised in the city." And they were 100% correct. And there were at times when I was like, "You're right. You're so right. It doesn't make sense." Then I went to get my hair done, and my precious stylist that I have known for, gosh, 30 years, she goes, "Deanna, what are you thinking? This doesn't make sense. You just lost your mom. Your husband lost his mom. Your husband retired. You're empty nesters. That's four changes. And now you want to make a fifth, all within 1 year. That doesn't make sense." So over and over, the opinions of others, the commonality was, "Deanna, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense." And when you look at it, you guys, it really didn't make sense. And so what we did is we decided to put our house up for sale. And the decision that we made is, you know what? If we are supposed to move, our house will sell. Within 6 months, our house will sell. And I really released it. At that point, both of us, we were able to release that, let it go, and just have that peace that, okay, if it doesn't sell, we're supposed to stay here. If it does sell, okay, we're going to move. So again, it was that doubting of God's voice. And I still do that to this day. So I have not perfected that. When I do, I'll let you know. And I guarantee it won't be while I'm here on this earth. But we went ahead and put our house on the market. But meanwhile, you guys, as we were trying to figure this thing out, and I want you to hear what I'm saying, as we were trying to figure this out, that fear, that doubt, that anxiousness, I have to tell you, was absolutely 100% exhausting. And do you want to know why? Because these emotions, fear, doubt, insecurity, anxiousness, the anxiety, etc., those emotions are not divine emotions, and they're draining emotions. The divine emotions are peace and faith, etc. And during this process, there were only a few months of the 6 month process where I absolutely experienced that 100% peace. Okay. I wish I could tell you it was better, but it definitely some highs and lows. But those emotions, you guys, if you are feeling exhausted, I want you to ask yourself right now, am I anxious? Am I fearful? Am I experiencing conflict right now? Am I experiencing some doubt? That's why you are exhausted, because those emotions completely drain you. Whereas faith and peace and joy and compassion, those emotions will bring you so much energy. So, and it's just that way because we're human, right? We experience those fears and doubts and insecurities. But I don't know about you. I would rather have a lot more energy and have those life breathing emotions. And when you experience those life breathing emotions that are from God, that is when you're truly thriving. And that's what I want you to experience. So during this process, we put our house up for on the market, and we just kind of laid it all out there. You know what? If it sells within 6 months, we're supposed to go. Meanwhile, we had lots of distractions with people's opinions, etc. And I went through a period where I felt some peace. And then there were a few things that happened along our journey where I second guessed, our house wasn't selling, and it was getting close to the 6 month deadline. And so I started to get anxious again. And Mark and I made the decision to come to our small town, and he had a class reunion here, which of all things, perfect timing, right? A class reunion in the middle of this. And it happened to be in the town that he grew up in, the town that we live in. And we went to this class reunion. And I don't know about you guys, but if you have a spouse or if you have a girlfriend or boyfriend and you've been to a class reunion with them, you know it is not like, you're definitely taking one for the team when you go to your spouse's class reunion. And I was taking one for the team. And I walk into the evening and not knowing at all what to expect. I didn't know anybody. And so I immediately migrated to the first people that showed up, because we were there early. And it was I don't even remember his name, and I'm going to send him this podcast because he made such a huge impression on my life. But he was a cowboy, and I'm a city girl. He was dressed in this starched white shirt. His jeans were starched. He had this big belt buckle. He had a hat on his head, and he was wearing boots. And he and his wife walked through the door, and I immediately started talking to those two. My husband was already starting to do his thing, and finding some classmates that he hadn't seen in a while. And so I started talking to this couple, and we started carrying on a great conversation, and it was amazing. And throughout the evening, I went off and met some other people, et cetera. And it was a fun time. By the end of the evening, as can happen at class reunions, things were getting a little crazy. And so I was coming out of the kitchen. Mark and I were getting ready to leave. And I ran into this cowboy again. And we just chit chatted, you guys. He knew nothing about Mark and I's journey. He knew nothing about our life, not a thing. Um, and I didn't share anything with him. But I'll tell you, it was about 2 hours from the time I first made contact and connected with this couple to the last time I connected with this couple. And we stood there and we chatted a while, he and I, and he looked at me and he said, "Deanna." So first of all, he remembered my name. And the second thing that he said was, "I feel like I need to tell you, when it doesn't make sense, God does. And I feel like I need to tell you the same thing. When it doesn't make sense, if there's something you are going through right now, but you feel the tug and you hear the voice, but it doesn't necessarily make sense to you, God does. And on the other side of that fear, that anxiety, that doubt, other people's opinions, there is peace." And at that very moment, when that man shared that with me, God love him, I started crying, and he just tapped me on the shoulder and goes, "I just felt like you needed to hear that." And I said, "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that." And so that became our words for the next few months. When it doesn't make sense, God does. When it doesn't make sense, God does. And I want you to know that at that particular time, 100% peace. I let it go. I laid it out. I had faith in the process. And when we got home, what ended up happening was we had an estate sale. We were getting rid of all of our big furniture that we'd had for so long. And we had a dear friend that was running that estate sale for us. And she had this couple that had come up from Texas. So we live in Oklahoma. So they had driven up from Texas to purchase these hunting scene portraits that were in our house. And I think we probably had five or so. They had seen them on a Facebook post of a friend of a friend of a friend. And so they thought, oh, this will match our decor perfectly. So we're going to go buy these at this estate sale. And so they put them aside, they called ahead, paid for them, and they just took a nice little 3.5 hour drive to Oklahoma to pick those up. And they walked in the house. My friend was there to pick, they were going to pick up their hunting scene portraits. And the woman says, I think this is the house that we've been looking at online. And he said, you know what? I don't think it is. She goes, I think this is the house that we have been looking on online. And come to find out, you guys, they had been looking for a home in Oklahoma. They had been looking at our home, and they ended up on a Saturday there to pick up portraits in a home that they were considering purchasing. So my friend took them around the house, shared the home with them, all of the memories, etc. That day, cash offer, our home was sold. And do you know what's even more amazing? It was 3 days before the 6-month contract was up. 3 days. When it doesn't make sense, God does. So I want you to know that the process of moving here, we had no clue, still have no clue really why we are here, but we have really settled in. And there have been some incredible things that have happened along this journey that I will be sharing with you for sure. Incredible things that are in my book. That's part of this process of being in this town and moving, was starting that process of writing the book that started almost a year ago in August. So I'm just going to reiterate, you guys, when it doesn't make sense, God does. But I want you to know that you are going to experience some doubt. You will experience some fear when you feel like you're being tugged to move in a direction that doesn't make sense. You are going to experience some distractions, people's opinions. And I want you to know that people's opinions and those distractions are trying to keep you from God's best for you. God always has good things in store, but his voice calls us to his best. And so those distractions are there to keep you from God's best. So stay connected to the voice. And lastly, number 4, remember to always choose faith on that journey and in the process, because faith is where you will thrive and not strive. So I hope that has been such a huge help to so many of you. It's such a precious story in my life. I've told it so many times. When it doesn't make sense, God does. And it's something that I repeat in my head a lot, because there are a lot of things that don't make sense to us, but we're called to walk that path. And it has been an incredible journey, an incredible path. And there's more to come on that story. So if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please share it. This is such an amazing thing that so many people need to hear about, is just choosing what God's best is for you. So feel free to share this podcast, and go ahead and rate and review if you haven't had an opportunity to do that. That would mean the world to me. And subscribe to this podcast as well. I have a private Facebook group, and I'm actually getting ready to go through a series on how to build social media. Would love to have you be a part of that. You just go to deannaherron.net and request to be added to Deanna's Diamonds. I'm just going to go through a really short series on how I've been able to build my social media by over 2,000 followers within the last 6 months. And again, I would love for you to be a part of that. I always love to hear what you want to hear. And I've heard from many of you. And if you have something on your heart that you would really love for me to share from my heart, I'd love to hear from you. So my Instagram tag is at Deanna Herron. So just send me a direct message. I answer all of my direct messages myself. So love, love, love to hear from you. Looking forward to next week's podcast. I can't wait to share what's happening on next week's podcast. An incredible guest, a great friend of mine, Lance Lang, will be joining me. So for now, have an amazing week. And thank you for letting me share from my heart. As always, it's a true joy. God bless you.